And joining me for all of that, three journalists who I'm pleased to say have not so far been banned from the White House. Can only be a matter of time. I've tried banning them from this show, but somehow they just keep getting past BBC security. I speak, of course, of Sam Coates, Steve Richards and Isabel Oakeshott. Welcome to all three of you. We've had two crucial by-elections results last Thursday night. It's now Sunday morning. Where do they leave British politics?
Well, I think it leaves British politics looking as if it may go ahead without Ukip as a very strong and robust force. It's very difficult to see from where we are now how Ukip rebuilds into a credible vote-winning operation. I think it looks unprofessional. I think that the campaign that they fought in Stoke was clearly winnable because the margin with which Labour held on to that seat was not an impressive one, but they put forward arguably the wrong candidate. It was messy, and it's hard to see where they go from here, and particularly with the money problems that they have. And even Nigel Farage now saying he's fed up of the party. Well,
we shall be speaking about Ukip later in the show. If Isabel's right, though, if Ukip is no longer a major factor, about not to become one, you look at the state of Labour, you look at the Lib Dems coming from a long way behind, despite their local government by-election successes. Tories never more dominant.
I think Theresa May is in a fascinating situation. She's the most powerful Prime Minister of modern times for now, because she faces no confident, formidable opposition. Unlike Margaret Thatcher, who in the 80s, although she won landslides in the end, often looked as if she was in trouble. With the SDP, she was in third quite often in the build-up to the 83 election.
People of the calibre of David Owen, Roy Jenkins, Shirley Williams.
And she quite often was worried. Now, at the moment, Theresa May has no cause for worry. She faces no formidable UK opposition. However, she is both strong and fragile because her agenda is Brexit, which I still think many have not got to grips with in terms of how complex and draining and difficult it's going to be for her. So, Thatcher faced no equivalent to Brexit. So she's both strong, formidably strong, because of the wider UK political context, and very fragile.
It's just when you think you've never been more dominant, you're actually at your most dangerous then. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, I think that for many of her MPs, they haven't begun to think through the practicalities of Brexit, and she does have a majority, I think it's now working majority of about 17 in the House of Commons. So at any point she could be put under pressure from, really opposition these days is done by the two wings inside the Conservative Party, either the small rump of about 15 Europhiles or the much bigger rump of a group of about 60 Brexiteers who've continued to operate as a united and disciplined force within the Conservative Party to get their agenda on the table. Either of those two wings could be disappointed at any point in the next 3.5 years, and that would put her under pressure. Yeah. But one more thing, I wouldn't completely rule out Ukip coming back. The reason that Ukip lost in Stoke, I think, is because at the moment, Theresa May is delivering pretty much everything that Ukip figures might want to see. We might find the phrase Brexit means Brexit quite anodyne, but I think she's managing to convince people that she is going to press ahead with their agenda and deliver the Leave vote that people by a slim majority voted for. Should that change, should there be talk of transition period, should the migration settlement not make people happy, then I think that Ukip does risk charging back up the centre ground and causing more problems in the future.
Of course, that could be a 2-year gap in which Ukip will still have to survive to take advantage of that. And as I said, Ukip's on our agenda for today. Article 50, which triggers the beginning of Britain leaving the European Union and starts the negotiations, is wending its way through the Lords in this coming week. Tarzan has made an intervention. Let's just see the headline from the Mail on Sunday there. It's Lord Heseltine, Michael Heseltine, my fight back starts here. He's going to defy Theresa May. I defied one Prime Minister over the poll tax. I'm ready to defy this one in the Lords over Brexit too. There we go. That's going to happen this week. We'll see how far he gets, how far will he get?
Well, I don't think very far. I don't think that loyalists, Tory MPs and Brexiteers are exactly quaking in their boots at the prospect of a Heseltine-led rebellion. I sense that many MPs, Tory MPs, are already moving on to the next question about Brexit, and what they're talking about is this discussion over how much it's going to cost us to come out. And the fact that they're already debating that and trying to move that up the agenda suggests to me that they feel that things will go fairly smoothly in terms of the legislation.
When I spoke, Sam, to the Labour leader in the Lords last week on the Daily Politics, she said she was going to push hard for the kind of amendments that Michael Heseltine is talking about, and they would ping that back to the Commons. But if the Commons ponged it back to the Lords with the amendments taken out, she made it clear that was really the end of it. Do you think, is that right?
That's about right. I mean, I'm afraid to say this is probably really a large distraction. There are going to be two issues that come up in the Lords over the next 9 or so days. One is on the future of EU nationals. We've heard a lot about that before. We'll hear a lot about it again. That could be voted on as soon as this Wednesday. And then the main votes in the Lords are a week on Tuesday. But when there's question of what sort of vote will MPs and peers get at the end of the Brexit process, and that's what Michael Heseltine is talking about today. He wants to make sure there are some guarantees in place. But the kinds of things that peers are looking for are pretty moderate, pretty much in the government's gift, and they've sort of hinted that they could deliver on both of them already if they haven't quite written them down.
The article, as I understand it, they're still not prepared to do. Amber Rudd said this morning, the Home Secretary, they were not prepared for. They may say, yes, we're going to do that, but they won't allow it, whatever that is, to be enshrined in the legislation.
I mean, the question is whether we think this is dancing on the head of a pin. What we're talking about is the government have orally promised something in the House of Commons. Will they write it down? Well, I think that's the biggest problem in the world. In a sense, this is a great sort of magician's trick by Theresa May, because this is not the most important thing. The most important thing in Brexit is going on in those committees, going on behind closed doors, where they're trying to work out what the next migration system is for Britain. Okay. And there are some pretty interesting, indeed toxic proposals coming out of that at the moment. But I think that Downing Street are quite happy to let us all talk about the constitutional propriety of what peers are doing over the next 8 days.
I'll talk about it for a few more seconds with Steve then. It seems to me the irony is that if we had a second chamber that could claim some kind of democratic legitimacy, which the one we have cannot, it would actually be able to cause the government some more trouble on this. It would be more robust.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they are very... I saw the interview you did with the Labour leader of the Lords. They are very conscious, contrary actually to some mythology, of the fact that they're not elected and therefore have limited powers. And she was absolutely clear to you that they would not impede the timetable for triggering Article 50. So we might get a bit of theatre. Michael Heseltine might deliver a brilliant speech. It is interesting that Euroscepticism in the Tory party began under Margaret Thatcher, but two of her most senior ministers in various cabinets, Ken Clarke and Michael Heseltine, are the most prominent opponents now, but they will change nothing at this point. She will have the space to trigger Article 50 within her timetable.
Let's move on. Let me show you a picture that was tweeted by Nigel Farage. There it is, coming up on the screen there. It's a little bit blurred on mine, but I'm sure you can see it. That is Mr. Farage and a small group of people having dinner. And within that small group of people is the President of the United States, and that was taken, I think, in the last couple of days. This would suggest that if he can command that amount of the President's time in a small group of people, that he's actually rather close to the President.
Oh, make no mistake about it. I mean, Nigel Farage is now to and fro Washington more regularly perhaps than he's here. Often that LBC programme he does is actually recorded over in the States. And it's not just the time that he has with the President. He is also extremely close to a whole series of people within the administration. I think that relationship there is a remarkable one and one to keep an eye on.
Will the May government be tempted to tap into that relationship at any time, or is it just seething with anger?
I think you can feel a ripple of discomfort stretching from Downing Street through to the Foreign Office, through to our man in Washington over this. We are in the middle, of course, of negotiating the state visit and the sort of pomp and circumstances and what kind of greeting Britain should give Donald Trump when he comes over later in the year. I think that there is a great deal of neurotic thought going into what that should look like. But one of the most interesting things about our relationship with Donald Trump is that there is a nervousness amongst some cabinet ministers that we are being seen to go too far too fast with the prospect of a trade deal. Even amongst some Brexiteer cabinet ministers, they worry that we're not going to get a very good trade deal with the US, and we're rhetorically placing quite a lot of store by it. And when we see the kind of deal that they want to pitch with us, then there might be some pulling back, and that could be quite an awkward moment in terms of our relationship. And no doubt Nigel will at that point turn around and accuse the UK of doing the dirty on Donald Trump.
Of course, the government would have to, if it is not a good trade deal, the government won't get it through the House of Commons.
No, and this is the nitty-gritty of politics. You see, Nigel Farage is having a great time at the moment. You know, he's hosting his show, he's having dinner with the President of the United States. Not bad as a kind of lifestyle. But he's politically rootless. He's not going to be an MEP much longer. So if you look at where is his political base to build on this great time he's having, there isn't one. And given that there isn't one, I think he's just having a great time. And it isn't much more significant than that.
No. Well, there's a lot to be said for having a great time.
It's a
having to get up at dawn on a Sunday morning to come in and interview the three of you.
That you're having a great time.
That wasn't really the implication of my remark. Listen, let's just look. Because of the dominance earlier of the government, we kind of ignore there are problems piling up. Only, 10 days with the budget to go that involve money piling up for Mrs May and her government, the business rates, which has alarmed a lot of Tories, these disability cuts, which are really a serious problem for the government, and the desperate need for more money for social care. And there are other issues. There are problems there, and they involve spending money.
Absolutely, and some people argue that Theresa May only has one mandate, and that is to deliver Brexit, but it is actually impossible as a Prime Minister to ignore everything else.
And she doesn't want to either. She doesn't want to be known just as that.
I think the bubbling issue with social care and the NHS is the single biggest problem for her in the weeks and months ahead. She has got to come up with something.
And Mr Hammond will have to loosen his belt a little bit, will he not?
I think he will in relation to the NHS. If you remember, he didn't mention it in his autumn statement.
Which on its own way was quite remarkable.
Which was remarkable. And I think he cannot get away with not mentioning it this time. And if he mentions it, it has to be in a positive context in some way or another. And it is one example of many. As I said at the beginning of the programme, she is both strong because she's so far ahead in the opinion polls. But this in-tray is one of the more daunting a Prime Minister has faced in recent times, I think.
So here's what will happen in Budget Day. Money will be more money, as Mr Osborne used to, will magically be found down the back of the Treasury sofa.
It was found last week, in fact. I think the fiscal projections found that he's got a wiggle room of about
because of the 12 of about
exactly, or about 12 billion. But just look at the bills. I think rebels involved in business rates suggest that the Chancellor's are going to have to throw up to £1 billion at that problem.
That's £1 billion.
3.7 billion is the potential cost of this judgment about disability benefits. Now, the government's going to try and find different ways to satisfy it, but who